So, over the winter, we received numerous teachings about dependent arising, and that prompted me to think a bit more about this life as the ripening result of past actions, causes, and conditions. And of course, I can't see my past lives, but when I look at my childhood and some of the things I was very much predisposed towards, that gives me some clues about what this mind stream has been fixated on in the past, right? And that's why it's still coming into this life. So I thought today to share with you an episode in my childhood that tells you very much what I was obsessed with as a child and how meeting the Dharma completely changed that. So when I was 9 years old, I signed myself up to participate in a storytelling contest that was organized by a shopping mall that catered to Western expatriates. My family had never gone to that mall, so I must have learned about this through a children's magazine. And I managed to persuade two of my friends from school to get interested in this as well. And there was a registration fee, so I had to get my parents involved because I couldn't pay it myself. And so when I presented this to my parents, they were completely horrified. You know, my parents are both Chinese educated, so they had studied mainly in Chinese for most of their life. And they were also educated in the hard sciences. So my father was trained as a mechanical engineer, my mother studied chemistry. So to have a child who wants to go on stage and speak in English, to them was just bizarre and inconceivable. From a very traditional Chinese perspective, like wanting to go out in public and, be different or step out, is like embarrassing or potentially very shameful to the family, But I was very persistent, and finally my dad said, okay, fine, I'll send this in and pay the registration fee, I'll drive you there, but that's it. Yeah, but no matter, I was absolutely thrilled that he agreed. And so I found a story myself from a children's book. It was a folk tale, and I memorized it myself, and I rehearsed myself in front of the mirror. And you were supposed to have a costume as well. So I knew that my mother had some old, what they call sarongs. And when she was pregnant, she wore a sarong. And I was telling a story that was set in a Malay village. So I was like, oh, that's the perfect costume. I'll dress as a Malay villager. So I found her old sarongs and I wore them and I, wrapped it up and pinned it. And that was the costume. So the day of the contest comes. My dad takes me, very reluctantly, takes me and the two friends there. I tell the story and I get through the prelims into the semifinals. My friends did not. Okay, so poor dad, he has to do this all over again with the semifinals. I don't remember what story I told, but I have a very clear memory of meeting a new friend. And she was a fellow competitor, and she had this beautiful princess dress. It was so beautiful, and I asked her, where did you get this from? And she said, oh, we rented it. I was like, wow, you can rent a costume? It's not your mother's old clothes, right? And she said, oh yeah, my mother sends me to all these speech and drama classes, and she's always entering me in these contests. I hate it. I was so jealous of this girl, you cannot imagine. I was like, you what? There are speech and drama classes? Like, my parents would never think of this. Yeah. So yes, the friend I made. So anyhow, so we compete in the semifinals, and she doesn't get through, but I get through to the finals. So now this is a big deal. Yeah, so I sat my parents down and I said, look, I am in the finals. And the top prizes are Toys R Us vouchers, okay? Hundreds of dollars of Toys R Us vouchers. Toys R Us vouchers. We'll get there. So, I told my folks, this is the big leagues, right? And I told them, we have to rent a costume. And my parents look at me like, what? Where are we going to rent a costume? And I said, don't worry, I will look it up. So I look it up in the yellow pages. This is before the days of the internet, right? I'm like trying to find costume rental places, and I found a few. I think I called one and then didn't dare to talk to the adult and hung up. So I got the helper to be my ally and call up. And so we found a place where you could rent costumes. So I remember going to this costume shop and seeing this whole room full of stage costumes, and it was like heaven. I tell you, I went in, I just thought, oh, I could spend the whole day trying these on. And my dad's like, please, Let's go. So I was telling a story about a bird. So we rented a bird costume where I had orange tights and this big white fluffy thing. And it was expensive, you know. My parents were so kind to pay the rental for this. You had to get it the day before and return it the next day. Okay, so I tell this story as a bird, and for someone who trained themselves, I got third prize, which was, you know, not bad. $100 of Toys R Us vouchers. So I invited my two good friends who had supported me the whole way, and I said, I'll share the prize with you. So I remember going to Toys R Us with my dad and the two friends, and we could pick toys of up to 30 Singapore dollars, right? And it was heaven. Going through Toys R Us, like just wow, all these toys, secretly hoping my dad would top up an amount, but he didn't. But so we picked our toys. And from then on, I was completely hooked about being on stage. Yeah, I love being on stage, telling stories, performing, wearing costumes. It brings you praise and approval. You win prizes, you get friends. It's heaven. Yeah, and that's all I could think of for the next 13 years. 13 years passed like that, where I didn't care about much else except being in rehearsal and being on stage. Eventually, the clouds parted a little bit when I was in my 20s, and a small window opened, as Venerable Semke described, where the Dharma started to enter. Some past different seeds ripened. And I remember being at a Dharma class. So this was one of the very early Dharma classes I attended, and it was a class on the 5 precepts. And we were going through the precept of lying, avoiding lying. And I asked the teacher, oh, if I want to write fiction, is that a lie? And he said, well, technically no, right? He said, it's kind of like the Surgeon General's warning on a cigarette box. If you borrow a book or you read a book, you know that it's not the truth, right? The book is labeled fiction, so you know what to expect. And then he said, but maybe you should read the Talaputta Sutta. I said, okay. So I did. And so this Talaputta Sutta is to Talaputta the actor. And so Talaputta the actor was a head of an acting troupe. And one day he went to see the Blessed One, and he tells the Buddha, I've heard from other actors, when an actor is on stage in the midst of a festival and he makes people laugh, he gives them delight with his imitation of reality. Then with the breakup of the body after death, he is born in the company of the laughing devas. What does the Blessed One have to say? And the Buddha doesn't reply. And he says, enough, don't ask me that. So of course, Talaputta asks again and again. And after the third time, the Buddha says, well, clearly you're not listening to me. So he answers the question and he says, well, any being who still has attachment, aversion, if they watch your performances and increase their attachment and aversion, then you're causing them more suffering. Yeah, if they're already deluded and they watch your performances and they become more deluded. Yeah, so then the Buddha says, thus the actor, himself intoxicated and heedless, having made others intoxicated and heedless, with the breakup of the body after death, is reborn in what is called the hell of laughter. And then it also says that if the actor has such a wrong view that by doing all these things, imitating reality, he will be reborn in a company of laughing devas, then there are 2 destinations for one with such a wrong view, either hell or the animal womb. And so at this point, Talaputta bursts into tears. And the Buddha says, this is why I told you to stop asking, But then Talaputta says, I'm not crying because of what you said to me. I'm crying because I have been deceived, cheated, and fooled for a long time by that ancient teaching lineage of actors who said that, when actors imitate reality, they will be reborn in the company of laughing devas. And he says, magnificent, magnificent, venerable sir. Yeah, just as if he were to place upright what was overturned, to reveal what was hidden, to show the way to one who was lost, or to carry a lamp into the dark, so that those with eyes could see forms. In the same way, the Blessed One, through many lines of reasoning, made the Dhamma clear. Yeah, then he goes for refuge. So when I read this, I was like, I see. It resonated very deeply with me. And now revisiting this sutta, I realized that the old translation didn't have the final paragraph in which Talaputta actually goes forth. He becomes a monk and eventually becomes an arhat. Yeah. So I didn't become an arhat, that's clear. But I will say after that, reading this sutta, and really thinking about it, surprisingly, going to the theater was no longer interesting. And that was also a huge surprise. I still remember, I had gotten tickets to this arts festival performance, and it was all hyped up. It was like by one of the most famous ballet dancers doing an intercultural performance with someone from like the Middle East. So there were, all kinds of modern whatever. So I go to this performance and I was watching it, and I just remember thinking, okay, there's a man and a woman and they're walking across the stage and someone's playing the drums. I'm like, that's it. That's all there is. What's up with everything that I had hyped up in my head, right, about who these dancers were and what the story they were telling? It's like, oh, okay. And that was kind of the end of my theater going life. So when I think back on this, I'm mainly horrified, really, by how much time was taken in the early part of my life. Completely obsessed with one way of being and not seeing anything else. And that is the force of past conditioning. Yeah. And then until like Thalaputa, I met the Dharma that got me to rethink all these assumptions. I was basically en route to a negative rebirth, really. So I feel incredibly grateful for the Dharma, for these ripening results in this life, that I was able to meet the Dharma and to have the opportunity to reconsider what I want to give my life to and to ordain. To use this life now well, to continue to create the causes for the Dharma, to meet the Dharma again in future lives, to always meet qualified teachers seems so incredibly important now that we've heard all these teachings on dependent arising. So may we continue to use our time well. And yes, for all the online audience who might be like afraid that, I don't know, I'm this putting down the arts or whatever, I think it's more really thinking of, for me, it was just so much about what I was going to give my life to. Yeah, and I had spent so long just wanting to dedicate my life to the arts and really thought that was heaven on earth. And to recognize, the nature of the actual results of that, and to think deeply about that, was what resulted in me making very different choices in life.
And acting also involved with the 8 worldly concerns in terms of wanting praise and wanting reputation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that even what you're doing is solely for that, the purpose of praise and reputation.
Yeah, but I was schooled with a lineage of actors who were not going to do that. We were making social justice plays or, making meaningful work that was going to bring truth to society and make money at the same time.
So they'll earn a living and then they'll be famous as the truth and social justice people who changed.
Yeah, or you're the martyr who served time in jail but got the arts award later. So yes, it's about the 8 worldly concerns, but I could not see that at all.